I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
A very good morning to you. It's 9:31 and this is The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood. Today we explore everything that Liz Truss said last night in that GB News exclusive special People's Forum. I was there and you'll have my take. Also, we'll speak to the man, the host, the maestro, Alistair Stewart, who hosted that event. And we'll speak to someone from Rishi Sunak's team to see what he made of it all as well. All to come after the headlines.
Good morning, it's 9:32. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. A man who is allegedly part of the IS terror cell known as the Beatles is due to appear in court. 38-year-old Aim Davis was arrested at Luton Airport after being deported from Turkey, where he was serving a prison sentence. He's been charged with terrorism offences and possession of a firearm for a purpose connected with terrorism. The cap on energy bills could hit £5,000 next year in the most dire warning yet. The forecast by consultancy firm Auxilion from April is more than £200 higher than previously thought. The Chancellor and Business Secretary are holding crisis talks with energy bosses this morning to find out how they can help households struggling to pay their bills. Shadow Justice Secretary Steve Reed says the government needs to scrap a loophole in the windfall tax on oil and gas profits.
Every pound they invest, they get 91 pence back as a subsidy from the taxpayer. Now, that is money that could be used right now to help people who are facing their energy bills rising over the next few months from £1,000 a year ago to £4,500 on average by next April. It is imperative that in the meeting between the Chancellor and the energy companies today, that they close that loophole.
Tory leadership contender Liz Truss has hinted she would consider further support for struggling households if she becomes Prime Minister. She made the comments during the People's Forum on GB News, having previously taken a hard stance on so-called handouts. The Foreign Secretary and former Chancellor Rishi Sunak will address Conservative Party members at a hustings in Cheltenham this evening. An amber heat warning is in place and the risk of wildfires is exceptional across parts of England and Wales for the next few days. The Met Office has raised its fire severity index to its highest level following the prolonged dry conditions, with temperatures set to hit 36 degrees on Saturday. Health experts are advising people to look out for children and the elderly, as well as those with existing health conditions. And the Queen's signature is on a collection of Royal Mint coins for the first time, celebrating her reign. Featuring 3 designs, images depict the monarch's awards and honours, charitable work and her commitment to the Commonwealth. The coins were designed by Irish artist PJ Lynch, who says the Queen's signature is a symbol of her personal commitment to others. TV online and DAB Plus Radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Tom with the briefing.
Good morning, it's 9:35 and this is The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, on your TV and on your radio. Welcome to The Briefing. Now, I was away yesterday morning, not on holiday, that was Monday and Tuesday, but instead I was on a train whizzing up to Lee, preparing for GB News' first People's Forum for the leadership candidates. Yesterday at 5 p.m, it was the turn of Liz Truss to face the questions of straight-talking GB News viewers in the heart of the Red Wall seat of Lee. Labour for 100 years, once held by Andy Burnham, no less. In 2019, Boris Johnson turned it blue. It will be crucial. It will be a crucial test of the next Prime Minister to hold places like Lee, if they want to achieve a decent majority in 2024, that is. The audience questions last night were sharp, respectful, but challenging. Exactly the sort of robust scrutiny that is so needed in this contest. Exactly the sort of robust scrutiny that other leadership contests could really have done with in years past. Small boats, the carers allowance and grooming gangs all featured prominently. But the overarching question of the cost of living was at the forefront of this audience's mind, as it is at the forefront of the mind of most of the people in the country right now. What on earth will the next Prime Minister do to help alleviate the pain of soaring global energy prices? This is what Liz Truss had to say.
We'll have a temporary moratorium on the green energy levy, which will save everybody money on their fuel bills. But what we also have to do, Alistair, is address the root cause of why energy costs are so high. That's why it's important we stand up to Vladimir Putin and end this war in Ukraine. And that's why it's also important that we work with the energy companies to bring the prices down.
Some of those lines we've obviously heard before, that moratorium on those green levies, reversing the national insurance tax hike, all in an emergency budget perhaps as soon as September. But there was a further interesting line there from Liz Truss, working with energy companies to bring down costs. That was new information we learned yesterday. And, of course, today, the Chancellor Nadhim Zawahi and Business Secretary Kwasi Kwarteng, two Truss backers, I hasten to add, are meeting with the energy companies in their current roles to explore options. Watch this space, perhaps. Well, another key question came on the kind of a team that a Truss premiership would build. Who would be in cabinet? How much power will they have? And what implications will this have for future policy? Truss set out 3 clear rules for her new appointments to the cabinet. First, that any such appointment would have to be competent. Second, that they share her true Conservative values and are, of course, willing to stand up to Whitehall. And thirdly, that they're loyal, not spending their time leaking and briefing to the media, but instead getting on with the job. Well, was that loyalty point there a subtle dig at her opponent in this race? Who's to say? But fascinatingly, we did hear one name who Truss would say had said she would want in her top team, Kemi Badenoch.
Kemi, I've worked with her as Women and Equalities Minister. You know, we've taken on a lot of the agenda of people who were trying to deny that women were women and so on. So I think she's absolutely brilliant, and I would definitely want her as part of my team if I am successful.
Kemi in the cabinet. New information we learned yesterday on GB News. An interesting signal in terms of policy direction and perhaps a desire to refresh government, make it feel different and with new fresh faces around that cabinet table and perhaps a clearer ideological vision. Well, part of that question of ideology also came in the form of Truss's attitude to what's known as the online safety bill. The bill as it stands would create a new category of speech it defines as legal but harmful, creating a peculiar situation whereby what is legal offline could become illegal online. While Truss said she supported elements of the bill that protected children, she said she would want to change the bill when it came to regulating the speech of adults.
What I want to make sure the online safety bill does is protect the under 18s from content that is damaging. And I have 2 daughters who are aged 13 and 16, and I worry about some of the material that they can access online. I also worry about the impact of social media on them before they are yet fully adult and fully able to take responsibility. I very strongly agree with you, though, where it's about adults being able to speak freely, they absolutely should be, and it should be the same online as offline. That's a really important principle, and I'll make sure that the online safety bill does reflect that.
Information we learned yesterday on GB News as well. A significant moment, the first time we've heard her criticise this move to regulate the internet, at least for adults. So not just a tax cutter, but perhaps a red tape cutter too. Ultimately, this event was significant not just because of what was promised, but also because of what was not. With candour, Liz Truss spoke to a waspy woman in the audience who was calling for compensation as a result of having lost out due to the equalisation of the retirement age last decade. She didn't have an answer that the waspy woman wanted to hear. But what she said she wanted to be was honest about that.
To be honest with you, and I have to be honest, on the specific case of the waspy women, I don't think it was handled very well at the time. I completely admit that, and there wasn't enough respect shown. I very much agree with that. But I think where we are now, it will be very difficult to go back. I just don't want to make promises I can't keep, to be absolutely honest with you.
A commendable frankness, perhaps. Well, finally, we also heard a further new piece of information. A significant new piece of information, perhaps the most important of the night, all about the Foreign Secretary's relationship with Larry the cat.
I already have an extremely positive relationship with Larry. I think he frequently sidles up to me. I think I'm one of his preferred cabinet ministers. And one of the many reasons I want to be Prime Minister is I want to build on that friendship that we already have.
An interesting reason to go for the top job, perhaps proving the Foreign Secretary has a bit more of a sense of humour than she's often given credit for. Either that, or she takes the issue of Larry the cat very seriously indeed. Well, now we've heard from Foreign Secretary Liz Truss, let's cross straight over to the other side of this leadership contest. I'm joined now by Kevin Hollinrake, the Conservative MP backing Rishi Sunak, of course, who I believe joins me from Greece in the middle of your holiday. So firstly, thank you very much for taking the time. First of all, I want to get your immediate impression of that People's Forum and what you made of Liz Truss's answers yesterday on GB News.
Well, it's a very good forum and exactly the kind of scrutiny that any future Prime Minister should subject themselves to. I am concerned about Liz's economic approach to this, though, particularly around energy prices, because principally, as you know, Tom, she's looking at tax cuts. But that will not really help people on low incomes, and it won't help millions of pensioners who will get absolutely zero benefit from the national insurance, cutting national insurance. Where Rishi's approach, as he's done in the past, has been to target his support. He offers broad-based support right across the piece, but also to those low-income households have had already up to £1,200 a year, which is far better targeted than tax cuts. And he's said he'll do it again. So he's looked after us in the past, particularly those low-income households, and he says he'll do that again, which I think people can take comfort from that. Whereas for the low-income household, somebody on national minimum wage, in terms of the national insurance cut, would get about £60 a year. It just doesn't go anywhere near to fill that gap that people are going to see in their household finances.
I wonder to what extent this is consistent with what Rishi Sunak said at the start of this campaign, that he didn't want any fiscal loosening, that might worsen the effects of inflation. Now, fiscal loosening can come, of course, in the form of tax cuts, but it can also come in the form of greater spending. Why would Rishi Sunak spending more, giving people money to get through this cost of living crisis that is undoubtedly weighing on people's minds right now, why would that not be inflationary, but Liz Truss cutting taxes would be inflationary in your view?
Well, you're absolutely right to point to consistency. It's hugely important. In the past, we've had too much chaos, really, to these crises. We need somebody who's going to take a consistent approach. Rishi's done that right at the start. When he announced his support earlier in the year, he said he would keep the matter under review and there would be more support if the situation got worse. The situation has got worse, and he's going to provide more support, and it's going to be targeted at the people who need it most. That's absolutely the right way. I've got to say, Liz's position I don't think is consistent. She's said it's going to be tax cuts, not handouts. Yet now she's talking about handouts. You know, we don't want these U-turns. It's very difficult for backbenchers like me to go and defend a policy and then have to defend a reversal of that policy. We don't want to see that, and that's what we're seeing through the handouts line. And we also saw through the regional pay bodies. He said you're going to do regional pay bodies, which would have cost nurses in my area about £2,500 a year on their salaries, and that position was quickly reversed. We don't want that. What we want is consistency, a calm, consistent approach, a competent approach, and I think that's what we'll get from Rishi Sunak.
What the Liz Truss camp would say to that question of the tax cuts versus handouts is that she's had this itinerary of she'd prefer tax cuts, but of course handouts to some extent may be necessary. I wonder if Rishi's playing his strongest hand here, talking about U-turns, of course, because first he said he wouldn't cut taxes, then he proposed this VAT cut. First he said he didn't want any fiscal loosening, now he's saying that he will spend more, perhaps in handouts to help people through the cost of living crisis. He's been accused of U-turning over Rwanda, over the Brexit protocol bill, over about 19 issues that the Liz Truss camp has put out in terms of accusing Rishi Sunak of changing position. Is this all getting a bit messy?
I don't agree with any of those points at all, actually. I think Rishi's been very clear right from the start. He had headroom in his budget, as you know, to make sure we can provide further support if needed. He said that right from the start, and that's what he's done. What Liz hasn't got is any of that headroom, any of that firepower in the cabinet, you know, in terms of making sure we've got more money. Liz has already committed to spend about £40 billion a year, cutting taxes on many people who are fairly high earners, so that cuts to national insurance would save somebody on £150,000 about £1,800 a year, and it saves somebody on low income £60 a year. The corporation tax cut saves big corporations, people like BP and Shell and people like that. It saves them about £19 billion a year, which, as you know and I know, Tom, lots of which will just go back in bonuses and to shareholders. I think Rishi hasn't committed to that kind of spending, unfunded spending, so he has the ability to step in and provide more support in a strategic way. He's always said he will do that, and that's exactly what he's doing. He did it in the past, he's doing it in the future. So he's committed that everybody will get something. Pensioners will get more money in terms of winter fuel allowance, and those low-income households will get probably hundreds of pounds of extra support to meet that extra cost of energy. I think it's a perfectly consistent approach. We won't see U-turn after U-turn with Rishi because he thinks things through, he understands the detail behind the policy, he delivers good solutions, and he implements them well.
I think some Conservatives might take umbrage at the description of a tax cut as a piece of government spending, given that potentially tax cuts will save people money, not least corporations not being taxed so much might be able to pay higher wages. But I'm being told that this must be the end. We've got a few more guests to get through, but Kevin Hollinrake, thank you so much for joining us here on The Briefing this morning, and I hope you enjoy your holiday.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, now let's turn to Alistair Stewart, of course, who so ably compared last night's forum. Alistair, first of all, what was your immediate impression of how Liz Truss conducted herself? Was it what you expected?
It was, and it proved to me that what you and I and our employers decided to do was absolutely spot on, and that was trust the people, the people's channel, the people's forum. And whether it was that brilliant woman asking the question about structuring a cabinet, she was a recruitment expert. She knew how to look for talents in people, yielding the brilliant answer that you ran earlier on about Kemi Badenoch, a key point, I thought, or whether it was the woman asking about Waspies and yielding, as you again underlined, that rarity of candour and honesty from a senior politician who aspires to the highest office in the land. I thought she came across as confident and competent, but I really would underline, and I don't hold a candle to any of these candidates, I'm impartial like you, but it was interesting that on the way in, 58% of them were pro-Liz and 40% had not made their minds up. On the way out, 71% were pro-Liz and only 29% were still making their mind up. So to me, it worked. I won't add to the agenda that you ran through brilliantly at the beginning of this programme before talking to Kevin, because I thought you got it absolutely spot on. I thought she performed very well and did herself no harm at all.
Yes, really, really interesting there that new policies and new positions were teased out by this format. I mean, so many weeks into this leadership contest, you might expect that every single possible thing that could have been said has been said, and yet more things were teased out. Do you think it was the format that did that, or the people of Lee?
Because I think if the likes of you and me and other professional presenters go into these formats, determining quietly at the back of our own minds what we think should happen. For goodness sake, people don't want to know what you and I think should or shouldn't happen. They want to know what he thinks, that guy there. What are you going to do to make sure that this seat, he said, remains behind the red wall? Blunt question, she took it on board and she gave an answer. My job, I need to sit up a bit straighter there, I'm slouching slightly. My job was simply to pop in occasionally, as I did in that one, and say, well, so you're talking about levelling up, and you're talking about white working class lads not getting as good a crack of the whip in education as others do. And I know that because my daughter's a teacher, and I listened to the Robert Halfon Select Committee report on that. Absolutely intriguing. So I was very conscious that folk didn't want to hear acres of me. They wanted to hear acres of ordinary people, and they wanted to hear what Liz had to say about it. And in that sense, I think it worked. Just a little probe occasionally, spin of the wheel, and then let it run. And I reckon 80% of it was ordinary folk asking Liz and Liz answering. That, to me, was a triumph.
Absolutely. And just very finally, briefly, if you will, Alistair, you hold the unique honour in British broadcasting history of having hosted the first ever prime ministerial debate back in 2010. How did this compare to your last outing?
Well, it achieved the one thing that my lovely friend Adam Bolton and I discussed after I'd done ours for ITV and he'd done his for Sky. And that was, you know, we really want to hear from the punters more, not quite so much from Dave Cameron, Gordon Brown and Nick Clegg. And Adam and I exchanged messages before this happened. And he was kind enough last night to say that worked. And it really is simply down to the People's Forum on the People's Channel. They really do know what they're talking about. And all of us professional broadcasters could learn a lesson, and that is just listen to them.
Wise words there, Alistair Stewart. Thank you very much for joining me this morning and going over what was a fairly successful evening yesterday. Now, finally, today, let's get the view of Kelvin Mackenzie, the former editor of The Sun, of course, on this issue and indeed on what more is to come for these leadership candidates. I suppose, Kelvin, the first question is, we've still got weeks of this leadership contest to go. What more is there to be said now?
Well, I think probably too much has been said already, frankly. I think we've come to the end of the useful life of these debates. You know, they're giving their views every single day. And the interesting thing is that as the projected energy prices go up, the give by the taxpayer, whether we're giving it away through taxes that they're going to have to go up, or we're giving it away in debts, which are going to be with us for 1,000 years anyway, they're also going up. This has now become a bidding war between two people with my money. I object to all this. I absolutely object to it. I'm not against the skint getting, you know, some kind of new social tariff. I'm not against that. But I am against the middle classes deciding whether they're social to money. They won't be going to Crete this year. They might have to go to, I don't know, Sidges, or even worse than that, go to Guernsey. I mean, that is what's happened. It's gone on too long, and it is really damaging the Conservative Party. Now, look, you know, as Harold Wilson said, you know, a week is a long time in politics. honestly, a TV hustings is a long time in politics now. It's just getting out of control. And look, Tom, GB News, Talk TV, ITV, even that idiot woman at Sky are entitled to their views, right? But I think ordinary people basically have had enough and actually would much prefer it if the decision was over and real decisions can be made about our money. They're talking about our money as though it is their money. It is preposterous.
And just finally now in this programme, where is the Labour Party on all of this? It feels like we haven't heard much from them at all. Gordon Brown, not the last leader of the Labour Party, not even the last but one leader of the Labour Party, but two before that. He's the person that's making news in terms of saying stuff about where on earth is Sir Keir Starmer?
Right, he's nowhere because he says you two people, Truss and Sunak, are tearing each other apart. You don't need any help from me, right? I'm going to keep stum and just see what how you could destroy yourselves. But the other thing to remember about Gordon Brown, by the way, while he was Chancellor and while he was leader, voted repeatedly to block and stop more nuclear in our country. One of the reasons why we're up to here in debt and the like, or facing that over the next 2 or 3 years anyway, is down to Gordon Brown's account. Why doesn't he address why I turned down nuclear? I'd be much more interested in that than him coming up, from his eyrie in Fife, handing out these rather good ideas of how to spend my money on behalf of people who really, the middle classes, have just got to take the pain. They have to take the pain.
It's a really, really important point you raised there. Margaret Thatcher in her time approved 3 new nuclear power stations. The next 3 prime ministers after her didn't approve 1 between them. Really significant in terms of our situation now. But we're at the end of the show. Thank you so much, Kelvin Mackenzie, for your view. Always really, really appreciated. That's it for the programme today. Well, coming up, it's To The Point with Bev Turner. But first, I'll leave you with the weather.
Hello, a very good morning to you. I'm Aidan McGibbon from the Met Office. Another hot and sunny day for the vast majority. Warm again tonight, but there is one exception. There will be continued rain in the far north of Scotland, over the Northern Isles, the Outer Hebrides, parts of the north mainland of Scotland, affected by a weather front which is just lingering here. That is draped around an area of high pressure which is bringing clear skies virtually across the whole of the UK. Some early mist patches in the east of England clearing away, and then sunny skies effectively for England, Wales, for Northern Ireland and for most of Scotland away from the far north and northwest. But even here, the rain will tend to ease later in the day. Staying breezy and on the cool side in the north of Scotland, 15 or 16 Celsius. Otherwise, 30 Celsius possible in the east of Scotland, 27 for Belfast, low 30s for much of England and Wales. 33 Celsius, I think, the peak temperature somewhere across central parts of England. Then into Thursday night, it stays very warm. In fact, it's a warmer night to come. Again, a few mist patches in the east of England and some of this thicker cloud for the north of Scotland. 11 to 12 Celsius in the north of Scotland, 13 through central Scotland, Northern Ireland, 18 or 19 Celsius for parts of England and Wales, where it will feel very uncomfortable, I think, in places for sleeping, particularly main urban centres. But it's a warm start to Friday, a sunny start for the vast majority as well. Some low cloud and mist will hug the coasts of eastern Scotland and northeast England. That will make it feel much cooler on the immediate coasts here. But otherwise, temperatures are rising day by day. 34 or 35 Celsius across central parts of England. Cooler there for the north and northwest of Scotland, where there will be continued cloud. But otherwise, the sunshine continues into Saturday and even Sunday as well. Temperatures rising up to 35 or 36 Celsius. Cooler next week.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning, this is Bev Turner on your TV, on radio and online on GB News. This is To The Point. I'm sitting in for Mercy Moroki and Patrick Christie's again today. Everyone's on holiday except me, it seems. Don't go anywhere, will you? And let me know what you think. GB Views at gbnews.uk. We're going to be talking straight after the news about the Tory leadership debate last night. What did you think about it? I'll tell you what I thought in just a moment. We're going to be also looking at the cost of living crisis. Why are companies profiting when we are paying such extortionate energy bills? GB Views at gbnews.uk. This is the home of free speech. All views are considered. But first, here is Rhiannon with the latest news.
Bev, thank you. It's 2 minutes past 10. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. A man who is allegedly part of the IS terror cell known as the Beatles is appearing in Westminster Magistrates Court. 38-year-old Ain Davis was arrested at Luton Airport after being deported from Turkey, where he was serving a prison sentence. He's been charged with terrorism offences and possession of a firearm for a purpose connected with terrorism. The cap on energy bills could hit £5,000 next year in the most dire warning yet. The forecast by consultancy firm Auxilion from April is more than £200 higher than previously thought. The Chancellor and Business Secretary are holding crisis talks with energy bosses this morning to find out how they can help households struggling to pay their bills. Shadow Justice Secretary Steve Reed says the government needs to scrap a loophole in the windfall tax on oil and gas profits.
Every pound they invest, they get 91 pence back as a subsidy from the taxpayer. Now, that is money that could be used right now to help people who are facing their energy bills rising over the next few months from £1,000 a year ago to £4,500 on average by next April. It is imperative that in the meeting between the Chancellor and the energy companies today, that they close that loophole.
Well, Devon Galani, who was the architect of the government's universal credit policy, says the government needs a clear policy detailing how it will respond